Okay, so our museum is closed, and we're not sure when it will reopen again. And all of us docents are very much missing being there and being able to interact with the public around the fabulous art that's at SAAM, as we call it. So we are trying to take our in-person tours virtual, and that's what this is. And we're still feeling our way, so please bear with me if it's a little rough around the edges. We're going to have time to look at only a small selection of the more than 40,000 pieces that are at SAAM and a small selection of George Catlin's work. Now, let's see, one second. I'm wondering if any of you have ever been to SAAM.
Maybe put it in the chat box if you've been. Yes, we might have some SAAM newbies here then.
Okay, well, here's what it looks like if you should get to come. For those of you who haven't been, SAAM is a little bit off the beaten path. It's in downtown Washington, D.C. It's not with all the other Smithsonian museums on the mall.
Lawrence says he's been to the Renwick.
Ah, okay. The Renwick is actually part of SAAM. Now, oh, Melissa, I forgot you.
You don't have to do anything. I'm just here.
Okay, I just want people to know that I have my wonderful colleague, Melissa Clark, on here, and she's helping to monitor the chat box because I would really like this to be more of a discussion as much as we can do that remotely. I'm going to be encouraging you to look closely at the works we're viewing and to offer your observations, your questions. I really welcome that, so don't hesitate. We can try having people talk, but you can put your questions in the chat box and Melissa will let me know when they're there and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so today we're talking about the works of George Catlin, who has given us a remarkable record of the lives and experiences of American Indians, mostly west of the Mississippi, from 1830 to 1836, so almost 200 years ago. So I'm wondering if any of you are familiar with his work. No? Okay. New to SAAM and new to Catlin. That's fine. I would venture to guess, however, that you probably all have seen a Catlin at some point in your lives. You might not have known the name, but his works are widely used and widely known. And I'm going to start with a portrait of our artist. So this is Catlin, painted in 1849 by William Fisk. And he had already completed his travels in the West. What can we tell about him just from looking at this painting? What can we infer about Catlin? Well, obviously he's very comfortable with Indians. He's got several of them near him. He is dressed like an Indian, and we know that he's a painter because he's holding his palette. We're not going to spend too much time on this one. I just wanted you to get a sense of what he looked at. And the way this artist has chosen to portray him is really quite wonderful because it makes it clear that this is Catlin's life. His life was devoted to recording the lives and experiences of American Indians. And so this artist has surrounded him with evidence of that. Catlin learned about Indians very early in his life. He was raised in Pennsylvania near Wilkes-Barre, and his mother and grandmother were actually captured by Indians during a battle that came to be known as the Wyoming Massacre. So his mother was 7 years old at the time. They were captured and held by the Indians, but the Indians treated them well. They fed them, they took care of them, and eventually they were rescued. And apparently the Catlin family held no grudges because his mother often told stories about this. And Catlin said that the stories he heard as a young child made, quote, marvelous and frightful impressions on him. But eventually he made friends with a family, an Indian family that his father had allowed to camp on their land. So he became very familiar with them at a very young age. He was about 10 years old at the time, walking in the woods with his father, and they came upon this Indian family. And initially, George was afraid. He wasn't quite sure what to make of all this. And his father walked up to the Indian man and put out his hand, and the Indian shook his hand. And that's when Catlin knew it was okay. So he became fascinated by them. He spent lots and lots of time with this Indian family until they moved away. And this is the beginning of the fascination that turned into a lifelong passion and a personal mission for him. But I want to go for a minute to show you how Catlin got his start. Okay, these are portraits of Catlin's parents that he painted, Putnam and Polly. He wanted to pursue his interest in Indians and his interest in painting. But his parents wanted him to become a lawyer. So dutiful son that he was, he became a lawyer, set up a law practice, but this passion that he wanted to pursue did not go away. So finally, he gave up the law practice and began to paint. And these are the kinds of things he started painting, portraits and miniatures, pretty conventional for that time. He did them well. I think he's got a couple of really good likenesses here. But it wasn't what he wanted. He really wanted to go west and explore the lives of Indians living in their traditional communities. He did paint some Indians in Pennsylvania, New York, and Florida, but the bulk of his work was the Western plains and mountains. So he spent time among 48 tribes, living with them and participating in their activities. He understood that he was seeing a way of life that would not last as settlers continued to move west and take Indian lands. In 1830, the same year he went west, the Indian Removal Act was passed, and the government began forcibly moving Indians from east to west, consolidating their communities and taking their land. So Catlin felt a certain urgency about trying to capture their traditional way of life, which he knew would not last. All right, here's our first Indian Catlin.
Donna, if I can just interrupt a minute.
Sure.
James put in the chat box that apparently Catlin attended the Litchfield Law School in Litchfield, Connecticut.
Oh, interesting.
So
I didn't know that. So that's not far from you either. Wonderful. Thank you. So how would you describe this picture of an Indian? Just some adjectives that come to mind.
Proud.
Proud, okay. And you said
very close. Formal.
Formal, yes.
And detailed.
Detailed, the painting is detailed.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. This is Keokuk. He's called the Watchful Fox, and he was a chief of the Sac and Fox Indians, who were originally from the upper Midwest, but were resettled in Oklahoma and other states. So we see that Catlin has really taken pains to capture, as someone pointed out, the details here. This man is standing very tall and he's very proud. In fact, Catlin tells us he was quite a vain man and he loved having his portrait painted. So he used to pester Catlin to paint it. But he also clearly is a warrior. He's got his shield and his axe and his spear. Can you see his necklace? Any thoughts about what that necklace might be made of?
Bear claws or?
Yes, bear claws, exactly. And so this is part of the symbolism to show that he's a great warrior. The feathers on the spear are also indicative of his warrior status. And the other things on the spear are scalps. So Keokuk was also instrumental in ceding his tribal lands to the federal government. He felt that it wasn't worth it to fight the government, to continue to fight the government. And so he entered into a treaty with the federal government to give up some of his tribal lands for a paltry sum over a number of years. And Catlin explains that this arrangement helped them materially in terms of their ability to live more comfortably. But he also knew it was the death knell for their traditional community. Any questions, comments? Okay. This is him. Now, I'd like you to take a look at these three portraits. Just take some time to look at them and notice the details and notice the feeling he's trying to capture here. What are some of your first impressions?
Resignation.
Resignation, that's interesting. Who do you feel is resigned? All of them?
All of them to a degree, but mostly the one on my left that says Wu Jin Jun.
Right, Wu Jin Jun. Resignation. That's a very interesting observation because we're going to come back to Wu Jin Jun toward the end of this session. So try to keep him in mind if you can. Any other impressions? Okay. Well, Wu Jin Jun, this portrait shows him as a young warrior of the Assiniboine tribe who were in Minnesota, eventually pushed into Canada, Montana, and North Dakota. See if you can remember him because he has quite a story. We'll come back to him.
Donna, we
Yes.
did get a comment from Beryl
Okay.
saying stolid and resolute and tranquil, which I think are three wonderful adjectives.
Those are interesting adjectives. Yes, yes. And they're not smiling, are they? That's part of this. We don't know if it's their formality that's coming through, because you can see from these three portraits that Catlin really tried to capture their individuality. And I think he's done a really good job of it. He's not trying to just sketch sort of generic Indian male and female. He spends time with them. He gets to know them. He lives with their families. So it may be their feeling that, you know, this is how you pose for a portrait, but it may also be a cultural thing. We don't know. We do know that Catlin lived among them and got along with them very well. He had immense respect for them. And they apparently liked him because they took good care of him while he was with them. Do you notice anything unusual about the girl in the middle? She's 12 years old, Shakoka.
Donna, we have a question about from Sharon that says, what is the significance of the hand across the face of the third portrait?
Good question. Good question. Okay, we'll go to that now. That's Washkamonia. He was an Iowa warrior. And the handprints on his cheeks and chin probably signified that he had killed an enemy in hand-to-hand combat.
Oh.
He also traveled with his family and other Indians to London, accompanying Catlin, when he went there to display his Indian paintings, which he called his Indian gallery. And we'll talk a little bit about that more at the end too.
Jim says, maybe he's talking about the middle portrait. He says her hair is gray.
Yes, yes, that's right. Catlin was fascinated by this. She's from the Mandan tribe, and they lived in the plains and in North Dakota. So gray hair at an early age was hereditary in some of the Mandan families. And he tells us that the women were very proud of this and took pains to display their silvery hair. But the men, on the other hand, seemed embarrassed by it, and they tried to cover it up using glue and red and black earth. So just a couple of glimpses into Indian life with these three people. Any other questions or comments? Okay. What do you think these portraits tell us about Catlin's attitude toward his subjects?
He was happy with it.
He was happy with it? Mm-hmm.
Jim says respectful.
Respectful, exactly. Anyone else?
He wanted to capture just where they were at that moment in many different aspects, whether it was the warrior paint or of Washkamonia or the lovely, sedate, lovely Shakoka with her beads. Are those shells on her dress?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And then the young warrior, because this would soon disappear, this, I'm sure. He was aware of that.
He was aware of that. And this was in the 1830s. So remember that that was a time when, you know, the settlers were actively fighting the Indians and killing them, and they considered them inferior and savage. But Catlin just had immense respect for them. He painted hundreds of these individual portraits, but he also painted their villages, their activities, their ceremonies, their environment, and the animals they lived among and hunted. He also doesn't shy away from the more gruesome aspects of their life. Combat with other tribes, scalping enemies, painful rituals. He depicts all of this. And in a way, I like to think of Catlin's work as documentary painting. He's trying to capture a very full and accurate image of a way of life. Here's how he describes his mission. The history and customs of such a people, he says, preserved by pictorial illustration, are themes worthy of the lifetime of one man, and nothing short of the loss of my life shall prevent me from visiting their country and becoming their historian. So he's committed. He's very committed, and his attitude was very unusual at the time. Other comments here?
I think I'm just struck by the richness of the colors that
Mm,
he is, and it just equates for me royalty. It's just so rich.
yes.
You know, I don't think I mean, it contributes to their enhancement as humans to me.
Yes, that's lovely. Yes, I think you're exactly right. And the way he has them, even though they're not smiling, the way he has them sitting, they're very dignified. And I love that you think it kind of conveys nobility, the color and the detail. The Indians, when he wanted to paint them, the Indians would get all decked out, and they would not come to be painted until they were satisfied with their war paint and their adornments and the way they looked. So they were very conscious of presenting themselves in a certain way. And he was very, very enthusiastic about that. He really wanted to capture all these details. He also collected many Indian artifacts, clothing and tools, implements, and that. I don't know what has become of those, but he was wholly taken with their way of life.
Donna, there's
Yeah.
a comment from Janet that says they each have very different facial features. Hers are more delicate.
Yes, that's right. That's right, they do. So he's trying very hard to capture real individuals here. Anyone else? I think the colors are wonderful in Catlin too. They're so vivid. They're so alive. I think they're marvelous. Some of his paintings that we have, unfortunately, are quite dark because of earlier preservation attempts, but these I picked because they were so vivid and so typical in a way of Catlin. Anyone else?
They're very solemn.
They are very solemn. They are very solemn. And again, I don't know if Wu Junjan looks like he has a little bit of a smirk there on the left, but we don't really know. Again, I don't know if that's just their conception of how they should be when they're being painted, or whether there's more to it. Someone earlier mentioned a sense of resignation. And their way of life was under attack. So that may be part of it too. Would be wonderful to know what they felt about Catlin. We have a lot of what he felt about them because he also kept a pretty extensive written record of his travels and life among the Indians, which he published eventually. But he really did get to know them. He participated in their activities. He lived among them. He really did get to know them. It wasn't sort of drive-by, let's capture these people.
Donna?
Yes.
Let's see, we have a comment and a question. The comment is from Mary Jane. She says, eye contact portrayed only in the last one. And Anne has a question. What type of paint did he use? Did he have oil paints?
He had oil paints. And many of his paintings are this size. They're 29 inches by 24 inches. And as I was putting this slideshow together, I kept noticing that. And I just kind of envisioned him arriving out there with these canvases, all of the same size, and his paints, his colors. But yes, he was working in oils, which is, you know, kind of challenging in those circumstances because oil paints don't dry quickly. And he was moving around. Anyone else? Okay. What do you see going on here?
Please. Playtime.
Playtime. Yes, lots of activity, right?
Yes. Very active.
Very active.
Skulls, animal skulls on the top of the
Yes.
home.
Yes, almost everyone, well, not quite everyone, but lots of these lodges have animal skulls on top.
Huh. Is this a small town, a village?
Uh-huh. It's a Mandan village.
Okay.
Someone says vibrant community.
Yes,
Jim.
it looks that way, doesn't it? Just lots of activity, kids running around, dogs, someone on a horse. Anyone want to guess what's on the poles?
Cats.
Hair from goats or sheep.
Yeah, I am, that white one could be. That white one could be. I am not sure though, because these are traditionally trophy scalps.
Oh.
So people with long hair.
Or just a lot of them.
Jim also says the Mandans helped Lewis and Clark.
Yes. And actually, Catlin went out to meet with one of them before he started his travels. I think he met with Lewis. I'm not sure. But this is a Mandan village. Catlin himself was perched on top of one of these dwellings. The better to record what he says was, quote, the bustle of the thrilling panorama that was about me.
It's interesting how close each of the lodges are to each other.
Yes, yes. And this is typical of this tribe. We can see that they're settled into kind of a permanent village here. Can you see the fence around the village?
Yes, yes.
So in contrast to some of the other Indian tribes that were more nomadic, following the buffalo, because that's what they depended on for food. The Mandans were traders and mostly traded surplus corn that they raised. He tells us that several families would live inside of one of these lodges, which are, yes.
Excuse me just a second. We've got a couple of questions
Great.
here about the lodgings. One is, what is the circular item on roof? The roof must be sturdy to have people sitting on them. And then someone else, Joe, said, what is the large cylindrical metal container? I think that must be a reference to the thing that's in the middle of
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we know what
I
the
wish I knew.
dwellings were made of? And what are the circular things on the roof?
I don't know what those circular things are on the roof, nor do I know what the big one is in the middle. But these are made of clay and earth, these lodgings. And as you point out, I think they have beams inside of them. I think I read that. They're very sturdy because you have people racing all over the tops of them. I'm wondering if those round things are baskets of corn drying.
That
Oh.
or the nearest one to us with the two skulls on the roof. It looks like they're little indentations, and I'm wondering if they're chickens.
Oh, let me see. I need to get this bar out of my way here.
There are definitely things in there. I just can't distinguish what they are.
Are they supports for the basket?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
They are
Nice.
rather regular.
I think they are, yeah, I think they're supports for the basket.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I would suspect that's what that is. If you look over here, this seems to have something in it too. When I first saw this, I thought, well, maybe they're capturing rainwater that way. But I think it's much more likely that it's probably corn. They're
Huh.
drying their corn up.
How do they get up on these little homes? There's no ladders. They don't see what they use to climb up.
Good question. Do you see these kind of beams along the side? Do you see these kids
Oh,
sitting over the door? There may be a way for them to go up that way. But they may have had ladders. We may just not be seeing them.
okay.
And Lawrence says probably carrying or winnowing baskets.
Right. Something related to their agriculture and their food. Anyone else? I love this scene. It's so lively.
It is.
Okay, so you notice here the composition of this. He's got 3 big horizontal bands. He's trying to capture not only the Indians and the village, but he's trying to give a sense of the country that they lived in, the wide open spaces and the big sky kind of country that they live in. And many of his paintings of scenes or ceremonies or whatever have this kind of composition. He's giving us both the individuality of the Indians in his portraits and the context in which they live, both their villages and their teepees that they construct and the environment surrounding them. So we talked about, let's see. We talked about his enormous respect for the Indians. And I want to read you something that he said about them. He said, "I love a people who have always made me welcome to the best they had, who are honest without laws, have no jails and no poorhouses, who are free from religious animosities. And oh, how I love a people who don't live for the love of money." So his time among the Indians really allows him to kind of develop a critique of the society he came from. Anyone else? Any questions, comments?
There is a question in the chat box, which I tried to answer, but I may not have done it justice. So the question is, I noticed there's fencing around the village and the fact that the lodges are so strong, this group was not nomadic.
Yes, exactly. They were settled because the nomadic troops didn't really have agriculture. They lived mostly on buffalo and deer and animals that they would hunt. And so they would have to follow those animals to their grazing lands. That's why they developed teepees, because the teepees were movable. They could take them apart and carry them with them. But this group learned to grow corn. And so they settled. They built their village. They obviously built this defensive fence around them. And they're quite a settled people right here.
Did Catlin sell all his painting to Smithsonian, or did the museum have to buy them from him, or did he just give them?
That's an interesting story.
It's a very interesting story, and if you'll just hold on to that,
Okay.
I will get to it a little bit later.
Okay.
fascinating story. Anything else on our Mandan village? I think it's rather inviting. I mean, I think it would be so interesting to just be able to walk through that fence and walk around that central part of the village.
Is that a dog in the center, or did they have domesticated animals?
They did. They had dogs. And one of his paintings that I really love shows them, I think it was Sioux Indians, shows them on the move. And what you see is a big crowd of people on horses. And you can see that they're dragging their teepees with them. They would take the teepees apart. They were held up by large poles. And they would use those poles to create kind of like a little trailer to put their things on behind the horses. And this one picture that I really love shows a dog with its own little trailer. So when they moved, everyone who could was put to work. And he has some funny comments about any dog that was large enough and well behaved enough was given his own little load to transport. So they definitely had, we see dog and horse there. Someone's riding a horse, looks like a pony right there in the middle. Anyone else?
The grass is so green across the way.
I know, isn't it? Yes.
It's beautiful.
Beautiful.
It looks like there's a second fence beyond the village. I wonder if that's the village green for the herd to graze.
I wonder, I noticed that too, and I couldn't find, you're talking about this back
Yes.
here. Yeah, and I really couldn't find out what that was. Do you happen to know, Melissa?
I don't.
You do.
I have no idea.
It looks like it could be a fence. I wondered if maybe it had something to do with their growing corn. Maybe it's where they kept their horses. I need to look more into that and see if I can find out what that is.
They're very developed,
They are
This-
very developed,
this
aren't they?
society.
Yes, quite sophisticated. And you can see the smoke here. You know, they built
yes.
their fires in the middle of their lodgings, and they left a hole in the roof for the smoke to escape. The skulls are interesting too. I mean, one of the things that Catlin noted was the respect that the Indians had for the animals. They were very careful not to waste anything. So when they hunted buffalo, they would use the meat, but they would also treat the hides and use them for making clothing, or some of the teepees were made of buffalo hide. And that was part of their respect for nature and respect for these animals that they lived among.
It could be an indication that someone in that lodge killed that buffalo.
Yes, that's right. It could be kind of a trophy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a bunch of them. There's two here, there's some there. Yeah.
But they're not on every one that we can see.
No, they're not. And that may be that the people living in those have not yet hunted their buffalo. No, it was a great skill to be learned by the young men from the older men, and part of a rite of passage. So it may be that that's a place where no one has yet killed the buffalo. These people obviously were not as dependent on the buffalo as some of the other tribes because they had their corn, but obviously significant in their area. Anyone else? These poles with scalps on them, that shows us that the person who is living in this lodge was a great warrior.
Oh,
You only got to display these trophies when you were a great warrior. So there's two here, there's one back here, there's a few over here. But that was, you were allowed to display those, and that signified to anybody around that, you know, don't mess with me.
So if you have four, like this one has four, what do the four represent? Like four, he's killed four bison or?
No,
whatever?
no, those are human scalps.
Apples?
Those are human scalps.
Oh, they're humans. Oh, so it does not represent animals. It's,
No, no,
humans.
these were scalps taken in combat.
Oh, okay.
Now, the two that are facing us
Mhm.
look like representatives of man and woman.
They
or-
do, don't they? Mhm.
Yeah, they do.
And I'm wondering if these four, if we're just seeing the back of them and that they
Well-
too represent.
Yes, that's a good observation. If you look at these four, it almost looks like there are faces here. Can you see
Yes.
that?
Yes, they
And
are.
here, I'm just noticing that now for the first time. I know these are scalps, but these look like they have faces. And you're right, these look like they are figures.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know about that. I don't know if they're figures, if they're kind of made of scalps and have these other things added on, but yeah, yeah, you've got good eyes. Anything else before we leave our Mandan village? Okay. Who can tell me what's going on here?
They're
Oh,
hunting with hides over them.
Bison hunt.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they've got wolf skins over them to disguise their humanness.
That's right.
I'm
That's
surprised that the buffalo wouldn't be more afraid of wolves, which are a natural predator, versus human beings, which you'd think they wouldn't be familiar with.
Well, here's what Catlin tells us about that. So this is actually Catlin and one of the Indians
Oh,
hunting.
Really?
Yes, Catlin is one of those people under the wolf skins. So this was a tribe of Indians that lived by hunting buffalo. And Catlin and his guide are disguised to sneak up on the buffalo. He tells us that buffalo were not afraid of wolves when they were together in their herds like this.
Oh,
I guess when they were, you know, if they were caught out apart from the herd, they would be terrified. But he said when they're all clustered together in their herds, they were not afraid of the wolves. And he says that this allowed him and the Indian to get right up among them. So it was a very sneaky way of hunting, but I guess effective because they didn't bother the buffalo till they were right on them.
huh. Interesting.
Jim says hunting on a cloudy day.
Hunting on a cloudy day, that's right. Again, you can see that big sky, you know, the big wide open spaces, which of course the buffalo needed. They had to keep moving to graze.
The colors of the grasses are exquisite.
Yes, they are, aren't they? Yeah, his colors are pretty amazing when you consider these are 200 years old and so fresh.
Wow. Beautiful.
now are the paintings regularly cleaned?
They are conserved, yes. The paintings, all the paintings in SAAM are rotated out eventually and cleaned and restored if they need to be. Some of the Catlins, as I said, are very dark, which is unfortunate because, as you've all pointed out, the colors are so wonderful. But earlier restoration methods were pretty damaging. And so some of the ones we have are pretty dark because of that. And there's really not much that can be done about it now.
Oh, it's too bad.
But yes, the paintings are regularly rotated out. I just want to read you what Catlin says about this scene. The poor buffaloes have their enemy, man, besetting and besieging them at all times of the year, and in all the modes that man, in his superior wisdom, has been able to devise for their destruction. They struggle in vain to evade his deadly shafts. They also stand unwittingly and behold him, unsuspected, under the skin of a white wolf, insinuating himself and his fatal weapons into close company.
Joe says the hunters seem to have a bow and arrow and perhaps more arrows on their backs under the wolf skins.
Yes. Yes. But you can see from this comment that again, Catlin is really captured by their way of life, and it's making him critical of his society and man, and really here. He's very sympathetic to the fact that the Indians need to hunt the buffalo to live, but he's also very aware of the destructiveness and the killing that's involved. So he has sympathy with the animals as well.
Two of the bison have their eyes on the wolves, in quotes, says Mary Jane.
Yes, two of those are eyeing them, aren't they? It's funny. It's kind of a standoff. We've got the wolves looking at the bison, and these bison seem to notice that there's something going on.
How did you know that one of those men under the wolf skin is Catlin?
He tells us. He tells us.
Oh, he does.
Yes, he's left a very extensive written record of his time with the Indians. So
Oh, good.
I was actually able to find that quote about this image. But this also shows us that Catlin was fully participating in their lives. You know, he was hunting with them. He was traveling with them. He was observing their ceremonies. They fed him and lodged him. He was right in the thick of it. Okay. Any more on this? We recently had an exhibit at SAAM on Catlin paintings of the buffalo. So he spent time. I'm just giving you such a brief slice of his work today. It's almost frustrating because we have hundreds of his paintings, and
Wow.
they're very diverse, and it's hard to capture a sense of the breadth of what he did.
We do have a lot of them up on the walls in the museum. When we reopen, if you want to come down, there are lots to see.
There's a whole gallery of Catlins, and then there's a kind of a circular staircase that the museum has used to display the Catlins also, because we have so many of them. Okay, so this is what he calls this: buffalo hunt under the wolfskin mask. That's our guy and his Indian guide. Okay, I want you to take a look at this for a few minutes and really pay attention to the details. Especially take a look at the background.
Huh. Interesting.
What are you seeing?
Teepees.
Teepees? Mm-hmm.
The teepee that the man is facing, but the Indian is facing like a town.
Mm-hmm.
Buildings. So it's just the opposite.
Just the opposite. That's right.
But the face on the man dressed in European clothing versus Indian clothing, his face looks like an Indian.
Yes.
Look at the nose.
Look at the nose, right? And look at the hair.
Yeah.
What else do you notice about the person in the kind of uniform?
He's a dandy.
He's a dandy. Exactly
Man
right.
in the umbrella.
I think the faces are of the same individual.
You
I
are right.
almost wonder if he's saying we're all the same, except for our sort of, our refinements.
Well, this is part of a very interesting story.
Let me read you just a couple of
Sure, go ahead.
comments before you go there. So Beryl says, each looking at the other's society.
Right. Mhm.
James, and I'm sorry if I got it wrong before by calling James Jim, dichotomy of life versus lifeways.
Mhm.
And then Lawrence says, alcohol and non-sacred use of tobacco.
Ah, good. Yes. Yes. Very good observations. Anyone else?
The beginning of the giveaway of the tribal land and the traditional way of life, says Joe.
Right. Anyone else?
I love his fan that he's using.
Yeah,
He
that's
is the dandy.
He's a smart man.
part of being a dandy. So this is the same person.
Mhm.
This is Wu Junjan, whom we met earlier as a young warrior when I showed
Oh.
you those 3 portraits.
Yes.
And this is actually Catlin capturing the culture clash between Indians and whites. We can see on the right side the dandy. Well, let's start with the Indian on the left side, Wu Junjan. Very dignified. He's standing tall. He has his very elaborate headdress, which indicates that he had become a chief of his tribe. The eagle feathers in the headdress are significant. You're only allowed to wear those if you've established yourself as a major warrior. But he looks at home in himself there, I think. Now we look at the other one. This is also Wu Junjan. He's not standing proud. He's kind of lurching. He's maybe been indulging in the alcohol that we see sticking out of his pockets. He's smoking. He's got this fan and the fancy red feather in his hat, his high-heeled boots. This is kind of a contrast between dignity and the opposite of dignity, I guess. But Wu Junjan became a leader of his people, the Assiniboine. And in 1831, he was invited with a delegation of other Indians to visit Washington, D.C., to meet the president and tour the city. So as someone pointed out, the background on the left side is actually an image of the Capitol.
Oh.
So that was his visit to Washington, D.C. And then, of course, on the right-hand side, we see the teepees that he left behind. So Catlin met him while he was en route, and he painted him, and he said that he appeared for his sitting, plumed and tinted, dressed in his native costume, which was classic and exceedingly beautiful. But in Washington, he soon discarded his tribal dress and took on both the customs and the clothing of his hosts.
So his attire is what he actually wore, or is this what Catlin created as the opposition to?
No, he actually wore this. And he had a tragic end. He returned to his tribe 18 months later, a different man. He was quite taken with this different way of life in the East. And he dressed in what appeared to be some kind of military uniform, like this, like the picture you see here. He told his tribe stories of what he had seen on his trip, but they didn't believe him. Eventually, they rejected his stories as, quote, ingenious fabrication of novelty and wonder. And when he continued to tell them, they killed him because he was lying.
That's so sad.
It's so sad.
Yeah, Jim M says very bittersweet painting.
Yes,
which I think
exactly.
is really accurate.
It's kind of heartbreaking. Yes. Yeah.
Sharon says the opposite of dignity is pretense.
Was this painted after he died or before?
Let's see. This is 1837, 39. And he was traveling in 1831. I'm not sure. I think
It's obviously a statement of what he thought of the fact that this dignified, revered Indian had turned into a, frippery guy.
yes, yes, yes. So this double portrait, it's kind of a microcosm of exactly what Catlin feared for the Indians, that their way of life and their culture would not survive the encounter with the white man. And that fear was really part of his passion for preserving their way of life with his paintings. All right, I'm all mixed up with my notes here. Bear with me for a second. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay. So Catlin's work shows us Indians depicted by a non-Indian, but this work was undertaken with a lot of respect and admiration for his subjects, by immersing himself in their lives as both observer and participant. Catlin didn't sell his paintings. He called his collection his Indian Gallery, and he tried to use it to educate people about Indians. He took his gallery to several East Coast cities, exhibiting his work and lecturing. And he also went to Europe, where he displayed his gallery in London, complete with an entourage of Indians and animals from Indian country. So we're going to end with this painting of a grizzly bear and mouse. And the story of this is that Catlin took several grizzly bears to London to display with his Indian gallery. And not surprisingly, the bears were not happy. They became quite destructive. So Catlin sold them to the London Zoological Garden. And he substituted this painting with the mouse intended to give scale to the size of the grizzly bear. He also visited Belgium, and the King of France invited him to display his whole Indian gallery at the Louvre. So he's left us with a really remarkable record of Indian life in the 1830s in the United States. But he incurred many debts as he pursued his devotion to this mission, and he ended up living in poverty at the end of his life. Fortunately for us, hundreds of his paintings eventually came to SAAM, where we can display them and continue to learn from them. Questions, comments?
Gosh.
Any that you want to see again?
I love the shadow on the ear.
Yes. Yes.
Donna, what would you recommend to be the best book about him?
Oh gosh. You know, I just recently got his own publications. There's one, and I discovered an interesting thing. There's one that he wrote for children.
Ah,
And I wish I had the title of it in front of me, but it's, I don't know, something like Life Among the Indians. It would be easy to find. I got it on my Kindle through Amazon. And I thought it was just kind of a condensed account of his work. And it is in a way, but it's really aimed at kids. And he says that he feels that parents would want their children to know about this. And that the kids, he fully expects the kids to be as riveted and interested in this story as he was. He tells quite a full story of when he was young, meeting the Indian on his father's land. And it's really a wonderful story about how he built a relationship with this family, the things they did together, the rather sad end of this family story. I could actually get the title of that and email it to Lawrence if you are interested. Would that be okay, Lawrence?
Please do.
Okay. Okay. And his other publication is called something like Notes and Letters or something like that. I have that as well. But I'll send those two titles to Lawrence and maybe he can get them out to this group. Someone also told me there's a wonderful biography of Catlin, but I have not read it and I don't know. Do you have any idea, Melissa?
I don't. I know somebody mentioned that there was one. I know his personal journals as printed are pretty. It's a pretty large
Yes,
volume of work.
it is.
Yeah. So Pat wants to know how in fact were the paintings acquired? Were they bought or did they come to us through the settling of his estate?
Oh, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I'm
I
going to get it
think
right.
they were donated to
I think they
us
were donated too.
from his estate.
I think he did in the end try to sell some of them
Yeah, but he couldn't.
to pay his debts.
Mhm.
And I noticed as I was going through them that they come from different people, you know, so I think there may have been a big donation from his estate, but I think also people who may have bought them donated some too. So we have something in the range of 400, between 400 and 500
Wow.
works of his. He also did prints of some of his paintings. And we have a bunch of those too. So it's a very, very extensive collection. And I'm so glad it's with us and that, you know, we have it and can keep it going.
Are there exhibits of his work in other galleries and museums? And also, if you could send the title of the biography to Lawrence also, Scoville, that'd be great.
I don't know that one. I don't know the title or the author. But I'll send the titles of his two works. Yeah, the one, his notes and whatever it is, the big one is huge. But I really recommend this other one, which I did not know was for children when I read it. And of course, it's written in that very formal kind of prose that was common at the time. But if you have the patience for it, it's delightful. It's absolutely delightful. And it gives you a real sense of who Catlin was and what he was about. He wanted the world to know about these Indians. And I was just so kind of moved that he felt that he should put it in a form that kids would appreciate. But I will forward those titles to Lawrence.
How old was he when he died?
Oh, let's see.
About.
I know that. Let's see. He was about 74.
Oh, okay.
So
A comment from Jim that says it's been very interesting. He recently read about Edward Curtis, who had the same passion as Catlin, only he recorded what remained of the Native American Indians through photography 50 plus years later. I actually got to see an exhibit in Michigan of the entire Curtis collection of photographs that you're talking about a couple of summers ago. It was fabulous.
Wow. We have some of those photographs in our
We have
collection
some.
too.
Yeah, we do.
We don't have a lot, I think, but we have some because I've run across them. And it's been really interesting to me to see the continuity. I mean, Catlin did a really good job because even 50 years later and even today, you can go into some of these Indian communities and you see that you see those traditions being upheld, not in their original circumstances, certainly, but Catlin did a good job of capturing it. Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you very much. It's really been delightful.
Oh, good. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being with you this afternoon.
Good. Thank you.
And I hope you'll get to come to SAAM and see Mr. Catlin, you know, in person.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay.